Hello. I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to decide anything. It doesn't ask you to perform or explain or keep up. It simply invites you to lie still and let your thoughts move at their own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of companion, a place where the mind is free to wander without interruption, where memories return, not urgently, but patiently, where understanding settles in quietly, without needing words. Later in life, the mind doesn't race the way it once did. It reflects, it revisits, it connects dots that once seemed unrelated, and it does this most honestly when the lights are off and the world has gone silent. This space is for those thoughts, the ones that don't surface during the day, the ones that arrive only when you're alone with yourself, resting, remembering, and gently making sense of a long lived-in life. So take a slow breath, let your body soften into the bed, and allow this night to meet you where you are. Before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these late hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. Your pillow is under your head right now. You may not have thought much about it before lying down tonight. You adjusted it automatically the way you always do. Fluffed it perhaps, folded it in half, pressed it flat, or stacked it just so, depending on your preference, depending on the position you've come to know works best for your body at this particular stage of your life. This small adjustment, this unconscious ritual, it tells a story you haven't fully noticed yet, because the way you arrange your pillow tonight is different from how you arranged it at 25 or 40 or even 10 years ago. Your relationship with this simple object has evolved. Quietly, without announcement, without ceremony, the way most meaningful changes happen in the second half of life. You've become a person with a pillow philosophy. You may not have called it that. You probably haven't named it at all. But it exists. It has been forming for decades, shaped by experience, by loss, by rest that was earned and rest that was denied, by mornings that came too soon and nights that lasted too long, by everything the second half of life has taught you about what truly matters when the world goes quiet. Tonight, we're going to explore that philosophy together. We're going to trace the wisdom that has accumulated not in boardrooms or libraries or places of great accomplishment, but here, in this quiet space, in the hours between waking and sleeping, in the place where your truest self lives, unguarded, unhurried, honestly and completely itself. So take another slow breath. Feel the pillow beneath your head. Notice its weight, its temperature, the slight impression it holds from all the previous nights you've rested here. Notice that it receives you without question, without conditions, without asking anything in return. Your pillow knows you, and tonight you're going to know yourself a little better too. Think back to the pillows of your early life, the ones that existed before you had any say in the matter, before you understood that pillows came in different shapes and firmnesses and fills, before comfort was something you consciously sought rather than simply received. You had a childhood pillow. You can probably still feel it if you try. It wasn't perfect. It was just yours. It smelled like sleep and safety and home, that particular smell that existed nowhere else in the world except right there, in your bed, in your room, in the house where you were growing up. You pressed your face into it on hard nights. You buried yourself in it. When the world felt too large, you dreamed entire worlds into it, night after night, without knowing you were doing anything significant at all. That pillow didn't ask anything of you. It didn't care how your day had gone. It didn't require you to be better or smarter or different from what you were. It simply received you as you were, every night, without condition. You didn't appreciate this then. How could you have? Appreciation requires contrast. It requires knowing what it's like to go without, to search for comfort and not find it, to lie awake in unfamiliar places on wrong pillows wondering why sleep won't come. You had to live through those experiences first before you could look back and understand what that childhood pillow actually offered. Unconditional support, total acceptance, no judgment in the darkness. These are not small things. These are, in fact, everything. The first half of life is spent searching for these qualities in people, in relationships, in careers, in achievements, in places you think might finally feel like home. You reach and strive and hope, and sometimes find them, and sometimes don't, and sometimes find them for a while, and then lose them. And you learn through all of that searching what they actually look and feel like when they're real. But the second half of life brings something different. A quieter kind of knowing, a settling, not giving up, not resignation, but genuine arrival. You stop searching quite so desperately, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've begun to understand where to look. You look inward, you look backward, you look at what's already here. Your pillow knew this all along. There's a particular quality to nights in the second half of life that the first half couldn't have prepared you for. A density. A weight that isn't unpleasant, but is undeniably present. When you lie down now and your head settles into the pillow, you don't just bring your body to bed. You bring everything. Every year, every decision, every relationship, every loss, every version of yourself you've inhabited and outgrown and left behind. You bring it all, and the pillow receives it all, without complaint. This is the first philosophy of the second half that your pillow has been quietly teaching you. You cannot separate yourself from your history, and at some point, this stops being a burden and becomes something closer to ballast. Weight that stabilizes, memory that anchors, a life so fully lived that it holds you in place when the storms come. You understand this differently at night. During the day, your history can feel like noise, like interference, like something you need to push past in order to keep moving forward. The day asks you to be present, to be productive, to be useful in the immediate world. It doesn't have much patience for memory, but the night is patient. The night has all the time in the world. The night says, lie down. Let all of it come. Let every year return. Let every face appear. Let every moment that mattered surface without apology, without rushing, without any agenda except the simple one of being remembered, of being honored, of being finally, quietly understood. Your pillow understands this. It holds your head while the memories come. It doesn't try to stop them. It doesn't redirect you towards sleep. It simply supports you through the arrival of your own life, returning to you in the darkness, the way it always does when everything else grows still. You've changed in ways that took you a long time to notice. The changes of the second half don't announce themselves the way the changes of the first half did. Adolescence was loud. Young adulthood was urgent. Even middle age had a kind of franticness to it, a sense that time was running and you needed to catch it, hold it, make something of it before it escaped you completely. But the second half arrives differently. It arrives in the quiet. It arrives at night. It arrives in the space between one breath and the next, while your head rests on the pillow and the house is still, and you realize, without fully knowing when it happened, that you are not who you used to be. You are more patient now, not because patience was easy to learn, but because impatience finally exhausted you. You spent so many years in a hurry, rushing through meals, rushing through conversations, rushing toward goals that kept moving the moment you got close to them, rushing even through good moments because there was always something else coming, something more important, something that required your urgent attention right now. And then, gradually, the hurry left. Not all at once, not with a single decision, but slowly, the way seasons change, the way light shifts, the way you only notice a tree has lost its leaves when you look up one morning and the branches are bare, and you wonder when exactly that happened. You stopped hurrying. You started staying, in conversations, in silences, in the present moment that the first half of life barely let you experience. You began to understand that most of what you rushed toward wasn't worth the rushing, and most of what you rushed past was where the actual life was happening. Your pillow knows this version of you. You settle into it differently than you used to. You don't just fall into it, unconscious, exhausted, barely present. You arrive. You take a moment. You notice the softness, the temperature, the slight impression that holds the shape of your head from all the previous nights. You register these things now because you've learned through the slow education of years that noticing is not a luxury. It is a practice. It is how you stay awake to your own life even as you're falling asleep. There's a second philosophy the pillow has been teaching you, slowly, over all these years of nights. And it is this: you've earned the right to need what you need. This sounds simple. It isn't. For most of your life, your needs were either managed by others, minimized by yourself, or apologized for entirely. In childhood, your needs competed with the needs of everyone around you. Adults did their best, most of them, but their best was shaped by their own wounds and limitations, and the particular era they were living through. In young adulthood, the message was clear. Needing things was weakness. Independence meant self-sufficiency. Strength meant not asking. Asking meant you hadn't figured out yet how to stand on your own. So you learned to hide your needs, to minimize them, to perform adequacy even in moments of profound inadequacy, to tell yourself and everyone else that you are fine, always fine, managing fine, when fine was the furthest thing from what you actually were. You pushed through difficulty with your jaw set and your eyes forward and your real feelings tucked somewhere safe where they couldn't cause inconvenience. You were very good at this. You had to be. The world rewarded it. But the second half of life has a way of dismantling those performances, not cruelly, not all at once, but persistently. Illness arrives, and you need help you cannot provide yourself. Loss comes, and you need comfort that pretending cannot supply. The body begins to require accommodation that the younger body never demanded, and you cannot ignore these demands without cost. Little by little, the idea that needing things is weakness becomes unsustainable, and when it finally falls away, something extraordinary happens. You discover that your needs aren't weaknesses, they're information. They're honest communication from your body and your heart about what matters, what's missing, what requires tending. They're not something to be ashamed of, they're something to be listened to. So now, at night, when you reach for a specific pillow, when you arrange it exactly so, when you discard one that doesn't feel right and choose another, when you take the time to get it right before you can settle, you are not being difficult. You are not being demanding or self-indulgent or fragile. You are honoring what you know about yourself. You are respecting the needs of a body and a spirit that have been through a great deal. You're applying the hard-won wisdom of decades to this small, important act of caring for yourself. This is not nothing. This is practice. This is philosophy in action. Think about what your pillow has absorbed over the years. Every night you ever cried alone. Every nightmare that woke you gasping into darkness. Every hour you lay wide awake with worry so large it filled the entire room. Every night of impossible calculations running through your head, money and children and parents and relationships and futures that hadn't arrived yet and pasts you couldn't stop revisiting. Every night of grief so heavy it felt physical. Every night of loneliness in a bed that should have had someone else in it and didn't. Your pillow absorbed all of it. But also, every night of genuine peace. Every night you fell asleep feeling loved, feeling purposeful, feeling like the day had meant something. Every night, after a moment of real connection with someone you cared about. Every night, you climbed into bed, satisfied in the deep way, not the surface way. The satisfaction that comes from a life being lived with honesty and intention. Every morning you woke up and the light was coming through the window at exactly the right angle. And for just a moment before thought arrived, everything was simply and completely okay. Your pillow holds those too. In the second half of life, you begin to see these two kinds of nights not as opposites, but as partners. The hard ones and the peaceful ones. The grief and the gratitude. The fear and the faith. They have lived together in your life for a long time. They have shared the same pillow. They coexist without resolution, without one cancelling the other out, without any requirement that you choose. And this is another thing the second half teaches you, quietly, in the darkness. Not everything needs resolution. Some things are simply and simultaneously true. You can be grateful for your life and still grieve what it cost you. You can be at peace with your choices and still feel the pull of roads not taken. You can love who you've become and still hold tenderness for who you were before the world required you to be otherwise. Both are true. All of it is true. The pillow holds it all, and you, lying on it tonight, hold it all too. You think about sleep differently now. Sleep is not just rest. It isn't simply the off switch between one day and the next. It is a relationship, a daily practice of surrender, a willingness to release consciousness, to release control, to set down the watchful alertness that the waking world requires and trust the darkness with your unguarded self. And this, you have learned, is much harder than it sounds. In youth, sleep came easily and without negotiation. Your body simply shut down when it was tired, and your mind followed without resistance, and you woke up restored, as if overnight renewal was simply a fact of existence rather than the gift it always was. You know now that it was always a gift. You simply couldn't see the gift until it began to be less certain, until sleep became something you had to approach carefully, to prepare for, to honor with ritual, with the right pillow and the right temperature and the right quietness of mind and the right letting go of everything the day still wanted to drag you back into. Sleep became something that sometimes arrived late, something that sometimes left too early, something that disappeared entirely on the nights you needed it most, leaving you alone with the ceiling and your thoughts and the particular silence of a house at 3 a.m, when everyone else is asleep except you. Sleep has become something you court, something you respect, something you no longer take for granted. And in learning to court it, you've learned something profound about surrender, about what it actually means to let go at the end of a day, to release your grip on everything you've been holding, to stop managing and controlling and monitoring and planning, even for these few hours, to trust that the world will continue without your vigilant attention, to believe, at least until morning, that you are allowed to be unconscious, allowed to be unguarded, allowed to need rest in the simple and total way that children need it, without shame, without apology, without earning it first. This is the third philosophy of the second half. Surrender is not defeat. The letting go you practice every night on this pillow is rehearsal for the larger lettings go that the second half of life asks of you again and again and again. You let go of versions of yourself that no longer fit the life you're actually living. You let go of relationships that have run their honest course. You let go of ambitions that belong to a younger and hungrier self. You let go of the need to be right, to be understood, to be seen in the ways you once required so urgently. You let go of your children into their own lives and their own choices and their own mistakes that are theirs to make. You let go of your parents into old age and into death, if that time has come. You let go of the belief that love can protect the people you love from pain. All of this letting go, all of this practice, and the pillow is where you rehearse it. Night after night, head down, eyes closed, arms still, breath slowing, trusting the darkness to hold you until morning. This nightly rehearsal is not a small thing. It may be the most important practice of the entire second half of life. You think about who you were before the second half arrived, not with the sharp edge of regret, though regret sometimes visits on its own schedule, not with the sweetness of nostalgia, though nostalgia has its own hours and you know them well, but with something that has taken a long time to arrive and feels, now that it's here, like the most important thing you've grown into: compassion for yourself, for the person you were. You look back at who you were at 30 or 40 or whatever age feels distant enough now to see with some clarity, and you feel something genuinely softer than judgment. You understand now what you could not understand then. You can see the fears that were driving the choices. You recognize the wounds that were producing the reactions. You trace the logic of decisions that looked wrong from the outside but made complete and desperate sense from inside. Whatever fear or hunger or unprocessed grief was running the show at the time. You could not have done better then. Not really. Not with what you knew. Not with what you'd been given. Not with the wounds you were still carrying without knowing you were carrying them. This is not an excuse. It is simply the honest truth. And this truth, this compassion for your past self, is something the pillow has been quietly building in you across all these years of nights, because the pillow is where genuine self-reckoning happens. Not the harsh, condemning kind that replays failures with the volume turned up and calls it honesty, but the slower, softer kind. The kind that happens when your defenses are down and your body is finally still, and the only voice left in the room is the one that knows you completely and refuses to be either flattering or cruel. That voice has been speaking to you in the darkness for years, not always saying comfortable things, but always saying true ones. Things about what has mattered and what you pretended mattered, about what you offered the people in your life and what you withheld, about who you were when things were easy and who you became when things were hard, about the gap between who you intended to be and who you actually showed up as on the ordinary days that turned out to matter more than any grand occasion. The second half of life is when you finally begin to hear that voice properly. Not because you chose to, but because you can no longer afford not to. Because the time available for comfortable distraction is growing shorter, and the time available for honest reckoning is the time that remains. And something deep in you understands that whatever peace you're going to make with your own life, it needs to begin now, not tomorrow. Now, here, on this pillow, in this darkness, in this quiet that asks nothing of you except your presence and your honesty. Let yourself feel the pillow fully now. Really feel it. Not just as support for your head, but as something that has been present through everything. Something solid in the softness of this night. Something that has witnessed more of your life than almost anyone. Your head is heavy, not just with tiredness, with years. The weight of a life fully lived does not measure itself in grey hair alone, but in something subtler and truer. In the density that exists behind your eyes now when you close them. In the way your thoughts move at night, slowly and deeply, like dark water in a quiet river, rather than the quick, bright stream they were in youth. This heaviness is not something to be fixed. It is not a symptom to treat. It is something to be honored. It is the weight of having mattered, of having been here for a long time, of having made decisions that shape not just your own life, but the lives of the people around you in ways you will never fully know, of having loved people through things, of having been present when presence was what was needed, of having continued on mornings when continuing seemed impossible. Rest your heavy head. You've carried it through a great deal. Let the pillow receive it tonight, the way it always does. Let yourself be held in this uncomplicated way by something that asks nothing in return. This is where section 1 of your pillow philosophy settles. This is the foundation, the early understanding, the wisdom that has been quietly forming in you through all the nights of the second half, whether you recognized it as a wisdom or simply as the gradual, unmarked becoming of someone who has lived long enough to stop pretending. There is more. There is always more in the second half of life. More to understand, more to remember, more to finally, gently, honestly name. But that comes later. That comes in the deeper dark, when the body has softened fully and the mind has moved past the surface of things into the true depth of what this life has been. For now, let this first philosophy hold you. Let the weight of your history become the comfort of your experience. Let the pillow beneath your head be the simplest and most honest reminder that you are here, that you have been here, that being here fully and imperfectly and with everything it has required of you is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the entire thing. Close your eyes if they want to close. Slow your breath to the rhythm of the room. Let the second half of this night carry you somewhere deeper. There is more wisdom waiting. There is more of you still to meet. Rest now. The next part of the journey begins when you're ready. You're still here, still breathing, still resting in the quiet that the second half of life has finally taught you to trust. The room around you has settled completely now. Whatever sounds existed at the edges of this night have softened into the background, into the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of presence, full of everything that doesn't need to be spoken aloud to be real. You've been lying here long enough that the pillow beneath your head has warmed to your exact temperature. It isn't separate from you anymore. It has become an extension of this moment, an extension of this particular version of yourself that only exists here, only exists now, only exists when the world has finally grown still enough for you to hear your own heartbeat without straining. The first part of tonight brought you to a threshold. It walked you through the philosophies that have been forming in you across years of nights. The acceptance of your history, the earned right to need what you need, the practice of surrender that sleep requires every single evening without exception, the slow, quiet arrival of compassion for the person you used to be. These are not small realizations. They arrived slowly, they cost something, and now they are yours in the way that only truly earned things ever become yours, not borrowed, not performed, not admired from a distance, genuinely, deeply, permanently yours. But there is more to say. There is always more in the second half of life, because the second half is where the real depth lives. The first half was the reaching. The second half is the arriving. And arriving takes time. It takes stillness. It takes exactly this kind of night, with your head on this pillow and your breath slowing, and the darkness holding everything gently and without judgment. So let's go deeper. Let's go into the parts of the pillow philosophy that only reveal themselves when you've been lying still long enough for the surface to quiet and the true water beneath to become visible. There is a fourth philosophy that the second half of life teaches on the pillow, and it is the one that surprises people the most, not because it is complicated, but because it is so simple and yet so completely unavailable until you have lived enough to receive it. Enough is enough, not as resignation, not as a lowering of expectations or a dimming of desire or a settling for less than you deserve, but as genuine, grounded, honest recognition. Recognition that what you have lived, what you have felt, what you have known and touched and lost and rebuilt and carried is not a partial life. It is not a life that failed to reach some higher mark. It is not a life that needed to be something other than what it was in order to count. It is enough. You are enough. The life you have lived is enough. This understanding does not arrive all at once. You cannot force it. You cannot convince yourself of it through argument or affirmation alone. It has to settle into you the way sleep settles, gradually, without being watched, in the space between resistance and release. You have spent years measuring yourself. The first half of life is fundamentally a measuring enterprise. You measured yourself against your peers, against your parents' expectations, against the image of the person you intended to become. You measured your success, your happiness, your progress. You kept internal scorecards that no one else could see, but that ran continuously, comparing where you were to where you thought you should be. And the score was almost never quite right, almost never quite enough. The second half of life begins to dismantle the measuring instruments, not because you give up caring, but because the measurements stop making sense, because the things that were supposed to indicate success don't feel the way you thought they would, because some things you were sure would matter turn out not to, because some things you dismissed as small turn out to be the entire point. And lying on this pillow, in the accumulated darkness of all these second half nights, you begin to feel it. The quieting of the measuring, the softening of the scorecard, the gradual merciful arrival of the understanding that you were never in competition with anyone, that there was never a race to win, that the life you actually lived, with all its wrong turns and beautiful detours and moments of genuine grace, was the only life that was ever available to you. And it was real, and it mattered, and it is, by any honest measure, enough. Let that word rest in you tonight, not as something you have to convince yourself of, just as a possibility, just as something to hold gently in the space between waking and dreaming, on this pillow, in this quiet, in this second half where the truest things finally have room to be heard. Enough. You have been enough. You have done enough. You have loved enough. You have carried enough. You have earned this rest. You have earned this pillow. You have earned this night. You think about the people you've shared nights with over the course of your life. Not just the people who slept beside you, though them too, but all the people whose presence shaped the hours of darkness in one way or another. The people you worried about in the night, the people you prayed for, the people you grieved, the people you loved so completely that they occupied not just the daytime hours, but the sleeping ones too, weaving themselves into your dreams, becoming part of the landscape of your unconscious in ways that still surprise you. There have been many, more than you sometimes remember to count. The second half of life carries a full roster of people who have mattered, people who are still here, and people who are gone, people you see regularly, and people you've lost touch with in the slow drift that happens when lives move in different directions. People who changed you so fundamentally that you cannot imagine who you would be without them, and people who changed you in ways you're still discovering. Your pillow has heard you think about all of them. In the nighttime hours when the mind moves freely, and without the social constraints of daytime interaction, you've returned to these people again and again. You have replayed conversations. You have finished arguments in your head that ended too abruptly in real life. You have said the things you should have said and understood, too late sometimes, what they were really trying to tell you. You have forgiven people on this pillow who never knew they were forgiven. You have asked forgiveness from people who never heard you ask. The second half of life is when you begin to understand that these nighttime reckonings matter, that the forgiveness you extend in the darkness, even when it cannot be received by the person it's intended for, changes something in you. That the love you feel in the quiet of this room, for people long gone or far away, or lost to the ordinary distances of time, is not wasted love. It is not love that missed its mark. It is love that is doing exactly what love is supposed to do. It is love that is making you softer, more honest, more genuinely connected to the whole of your life and everyone who moved through it. You've learned that love in the second half of life is less urgent than it was before, but no less real. It does not need to perform itself the way young love does. It does not require constant demonstration or reassurance. It is settled into something sturdier, something that can coexist with absence and distance, and even death. Something that doesn't stop being love simply because the person it was directed toward is no longer in the room or in the world. The love you carry in the second half, the love you carry on this pillow tonight, is a kind of love the first half couldn't have held. It requires too much capacity, too much room, too much willingness to hold loss and love simultaneously without insisting that one cancels the other. But you have that capacity now. It was built in you through years of loving people through difficult things, through staying, through being present for the hard passages that love sometimes requires, through discovering that love is not primarily about happiness, though happiness visits, but about commitment to the reality of another person, to their full reality, their flaws and fears and failures, alongside their beauty and their light. You know this now. You know it in your body. You feel it in these nighttime hours when the people you love move through your thoughts like a procession, each one carrying what they carry. each one having given you something irreplaceable. Each one having taken something with them when they went. They are all here tonight, on this pillow, in this darkness, not as ghosts, not as regrets, but as the living proof that your life has been populated by love, that you are not alone in this, that however isolated you may sometimes feel in the long nights of the second half, you have been accompanied. You have been chosen by people, and you have chosen people, and that choosing, that mutual recognition, is the most human thing there is. Let them be present tonight without grief. Let them be the warmth they were. Let the memory of them be comfort rather than ache. You carry them beautifully. You have carried them for a long time. Let the pillow help you hold that weight tonight, the way it always does, quietly, steadily, without asking you to put it down. The fifth philosophy arrives in the body, not in the mind, where so much of this night's wisdom has gathered, but in the body itself, the one you've been living in for all of these decades, the one that has carried you through everything and asked so little in return, and is now, in the second half, beginning to ask more. Your body has a different relationship with the pillow than it did before. You know this intimately. You feel it every night in the careful arranging, in the way certain positions no longer work the way they used to, in the way you've learned the particular geography of your own discomfort and navigate around it with the expertise of long practice, in the way a good night's positioning makes the difference between waking restored and waking stiff and sore, and having to spend the first hour of the day negotiating a truce with your own bones. You have learned to listen to your body in the second half of life in ways the first half never required. The first half allowed you to largely ignore it, to push past fatigue, to eat carelessly, to neglect sleep without immediate consequence, to treat the body as a vehicle rather than a companion, to assume it would simply comply with whatever demands you placed on it indefinitely. The second half has corrected this assumption, gently at first, then less gently, then with the particular insistence of a body that has finally decided it will not be ignored any longer. Pain that doesn't resolve, tiredness that doesn't lift with a single good night's rest, limitations that arrive without asking permission and stay without a clear departure date. The body in the second half becomes impossible to pretend away, and in responding to it, in listening to it, in taking its communications seriously, rather than overriding them in service of productivity or performance or the appearance of having everything under control, something unexpected happens. You begin to inhabit your body for the first time, not from the outside, as an object to be managed and presented, but from the inside, as the actual location of your existence, as the thing that is simultaneously you and the vehicle that carries you, as something worthy of genuine attention, genuine gratitude, genuine care. Your body has done extraordinary things, not necessarily extraordinary in the way that wins recognition or applause, but extraordinary in the truest sense. It has breathed continuously without your permission, kept your heart beating through every crisis, healed wounds you thought might be permanent, adapted to losses you weren't sure it could survive. It has carried children if you had them, or carried grief if you didn't. It has stood at bedsides and gravesides and wedding altars and hospital waiting rooms. It has trembled with fear and vibrated with joy and collapsed with exhaustion and risen again the next morning to try once more. It has brought you to this night, to this pillow, to this breath you're taking right now, this slow, quiet breath that is happening without effort, without intention, simply because your body knows how to keep you alive and is doing so right now as you rest. The fifth philosophy is gratitude for this body, not the aspirational kind that requires your body to be something other than what it is, but gratitude for the actual body, the real one, the one with its aches and its limitations and its unexpected discoveries and its faithful, continuous, unrewarded labor on your behalf across all these decades of a full and demanding life. Feel it now, the weight of your body against the mattress, the warmth it generates without effort, the steady rise and fall of your chest, the quiet work happening in every cell, even now, even in the stillness. Your body is not resting entirely. It is repairing. It is rebuilding. It is doing the work that only sleep allows. And your pillow is part of this, providing the proper angle for your neck, supporting the weight of your head so the muscles can release, participating in the care of this body that has carried you so faithfully and deserves to be carried in return. This is not small. This is not indulgent. This is the most honest kind of gratitude there is. The kind directed not at some abstract blessing, but at the specific, physical, irreplaceable fact of being alive in this body on this night. There is something that happens in the very late night hours, the hours past midnight, when even the last sounds of the neighborhood have gone completely quiet, and the darkness feels total, and the only things that exist are your own breathing, and the soft weight of the pillow, and the vast, unhurried expanse of night still ahead. In those hours, something loosens that cannot loosen during the day. Some final layer of performance falls away. Some last defense that you didn't even know you were maintaining dissolves into the darkness and leaves you utterly, completely yourself. This is the territory of the sixth philosophy, the one that lives in the deepest part of the night, the one that cannot be accessed through effort or intention, but only through the patience of lying still long enough for everything else to fall away. In that space, you meet the part of yourself that has been constant across everything, through every change, through every loss, through every transformation and identity, shift and chapter end and new beginning. There is a self that was there before the roles you've inhabited, before the titles and the relationships and the responsibilities, before the carefully constructed narrative of who you are and how you got here and what it all means. This self doesn't need the narrative. It exists without it. It is the part of you that was present before the first half began and will be present after the second half ends. It is the part that watches, that knows, that does not need to perform or explain or justify itself to anyone, not even to you. You have felt this before, in moments of great stillness, at the edge of sleep, in those suspended seconds after waking, when you don't yet know who you are, and there's a strange, clean peace in not knowing. In moments of nature so beautiful, it briefly stopped thought entirely. In moments of grief so total it burned through everything that was not essential. In all those moments, you met this deeper self, the one that is simply and entirely present, without history in those moments, without future, without the weight of everything you've accumulated, just the bare, undecorated fact of being alive and aware. Your pillow has been the site of these meetings more often than anywhere else, because this is where you come every night to eventually, finally, let everything go. And in the letting go, this deeper self has space to breathe, to be recognized, to remind you that underneath all the complexity of a second half life, underneath the years and the roles and the earned wisdom and the accumulated losses, there is something simple and unchanged and fundamentally okay. You are not only the sum of your history. You are also underneath all of that, something that preceded your history, something that will outlast your history, something that the darkness knows and the pillow holds and the night recognizes even when you've forgotten to recognize it yourself. In the second half of life, these nighttime meetings with your deepest self become more frequent, more accessible. The performances of the day release their hold more completely by midnight. The defending and explaining and managing that daylight requires fades earlier, leaves more room, creates more space for this quiet self-recognition that is the truest rest of all. Not sleep yet, but rest. Real rest. The kind that comes from meeting yourself honestly in the dark, from allowing this deepest part to exist without needing it to accomplish anything, without needing it to be productive or purposeful or understood, simply allowing it to be here, on this pillow, in this body, in this night that belongs entirely to the quiet and true parts of you. The seventh philosophy comes quietly, almost without announcing itself. It arrives in the rhythm of your breath and the warmth of the pillow and the particular peace that deep night brings when you've stopped fighting it and started receiving it. It is this. The night is not something to be endured. It is something to be inhabited. For much of the first half of life, the night was primarily an obstacle between one productive day and the next. Sleep was necessary maintenance. Nighttime was the mandatory downtime of a body that wouldn't function without it. You slept because you had to, and when sleep was difficult, when it refused to come or came and left too soon, it felt like failure, like your body wasn't cooperating with the schedule your life required. But in the second half, the night becomes something else entirely. It becomes the part of the day that belongs to you completely, not to your responsibilities, not to other people's needs, not to the demands of the world that arise fresh and insistent every morning, just to you, to your thoughts, to your memories, to the slow and honest processing that a full life requires and that only the night has the patience to provide. The night in the second half of life is not a gap between days. It is a destination, a place you come to not just for sleep, but for the kind of being that sleep makes possible. Being without agenda, being without performance, being that is so close to pure existence that it brushes against something that feels almost almost like the mystery at the center of everything. You don't have a name for that mystery, and that's all right. The second half of life teaches you that not everything needs a name to be real. Some things are most honestly held in silence, in the darkness, on a pillow, in the hours when the mind stops reaching for answers and simply exists inside the question of what it means to be here at all. You exist here tonight, quietly, completely, without needing it to be more than it is. And it is exactly as it is enough. Your breath is slowing now. You can feel it, each breath arriving a little more easily than the last. Each exhale releasing something that the earlier hours of the night were still holding. The whole of you is moving, slowly and without effort, toward the threshold between waking and sleeping. That soft border country where thoughts lose their sharp edges and begin to drift like clouds moving in slow air. Before you cross that threshold completely, there is one last thing to say. One last philosophy to carry into sleep. The one that contains all the others. The one that the pillow has been waiting all night, all these years of nights, to finally say clearly. You have been living a life of meaning. Not a perfect life. Not an easy life. Not a life free of regret or loss or the particular pain that comes from loving people in a world where loss is inevitable, but a life of genuine, irreducible, honest meaning. You have mattered to people whose names you know, and people whose names you've forgotten, and people who never told you what you meant to them, and people who couldn't find the words. You have mattered in the small ways that are actually the largest ways. In the patience you showed when impatience would have been easier. In the presence you offered when absence would have been more comfortable. In the love you gave that was real enough to cost you something. In the times you showed up, even when showing up was the hardest possible thing. You have contributed to the world in ways that cannot be measured. The conversations you had that changed how someone thought. The kindness you offered that arrived at exactly the moment someone needed kindness and would remember it, even if you forgot giving it for the rest of their life. The steadiness you maintained during someone else's storm. The example you set without knowing you were setting it for someone who was watching and learning from who you were in ordinary moments. This is your legacy. Not the achievements that can be listed, but the invisible, immeasurable, absolutely real impact of a life lived in the presence of other people with genuine care and honest effort. This is what the second half of life allows you to finally see clearly, because the second half has enough distance from the striving of the first half to look back without the distortion of ambition and see what was actually happening all along. What was actually happening was a life, your specific, unrepeatable, fully inhabited life. And it mattered, and it still matters, and it will matter in ways that continue after you, in the people you've shaped and the love you've passed on and the small, essential changes you've made in the world simply by being present in it with as much honesty and care as you could manage. Feel this on the pillow tonight, not as flattery, not as comfortable fiction, but as the truest thing this entire night has been building toward, the most honest assessment available to a person who has been lying still long enough for all the noise to clear. You have lived a life of meaning, and meaning is not nothing. Meaning is, in fact, everything. The pillow beneath your head holds all of this now. All of tonight's philosophy. All of the wisdom this particular second half has been building in you night by night, year by year, in the faithful darkness of every night you've ever lain awake and honest with yourself and allowed the deeper understanding to surface. It holds the compassion you found for your past self, the acceptance of your history as ballast rather than burden, the earned right to need what you need without apology, the practice of surrender that sleep teaches every night, the gratitude for a body that has served you faithfully through everything, the meetings with your deepest self in the late hours when every performance finally falls away, the understanding that the night itself is not an obstacle but a destination, the recognition that enough, genuine and complete enough, is not a defeat but an arrival. All of this lives in the pillow beneath your head. Tonight, not as abstractions, as lived truth, as the hard-won, honestly earned, quietly accumulated wisdom of a second half of life that is still happening, that is happening right now, in this breath, in this darkness, in this stillness that holds you as completely and as uncomplicatedly as anything has ever held you. You are not finished. The second half is not a winding down. It is a deepening. It is the part of the story where the most important things are finally said, where the truest self finally has room to breathe, where the love you've carried gets to rest without needing to prove anything, where the meaning you've made gets to simply exist quietly, without performance, in the dark where real things live. You are in that deepening right now, here on this pillow, in this bed, in this night. Let your eyes close completely if they haven't already. Let the thoughts that have moved through you tonight settle the way things settle in deep water, softly, without urgency, finding their level, finding their rest. Your breath is already doing this. Your body knows what to do. It has done this 10,000 times before, and it will do it again tonight, with the same faithful, quiet competence that your body brings to everything it does on your behalf, without recognition and without complaint. Let it take you now. Let the night take you. Let the pillow hold what you no longer need to hold consciously. The wisdom is already in you. The philosophy is already yours. It will be there when you wake, deeper than when you lay down, quieter, more settled, more fully and honestly a part of who you are. You have done enough for today. You have thought enough. You have remembered enough. You have been honest enough with yourself tonight that the honesty will stay with you, will work in you while you sleep, will continue the gentle, faithful work of making you more fully yourself, even in the hours when you're not aware of any work being done. This is the gift of the pillow in the second half of life. It is not just a place to rest your head. It is the site of your becoming, the location of your truest self-knowledge, the faithful companion that receives you night after night without conditions, without judgment, without anything required in return except your honest presence. And tonight, as on every night, you have given it that. You have been present. You have been honest. You've allowed yourself to be held. That is everything. That is, and always has been, enough. The fires die down, the stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Good night. You've journeyed far through time tonight. Now it's time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.